June 14, 2018. The lobby of a Manhattan luxury condominium smells like polished marble and money. A doorman holds the elevator. A man in a tailored Navy suit checks his phone. He is scheduled to speak at a fintech conference in 40 minutes. Then the glass doors burst open. Federal agents move fast. No sirens, no shouting. Just badges flashing under LED lights. One agent grips his arm. Another reads from a warrant issued by the Southern District of New York. Wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, estimated damages, $250 million. Residents freeze. Phones rise. The man does not resist. How does someone accused of stealing $250 million walk into a building like this in the first place? And why, months later, will he walk out of a courtroom with barely a prison sentence? His name is never shouted in headlines at first. It appears in financial journals, compliance memos, internal treasury alerts. He is described as innovative, charismatic, brilliant with numbers. He grows up in a mid-sized Midwest town where banks close at 4 p.m. and everyone trusts the system. His father works municipal accounting. His mother teaches math. Dinner conversations revolve around budgets, deficits, arbitrage. He learns early that numbers aren't just symbols, they're leverage. At 22, he lands a junior analyst job at a regional investment firm. He studies regulatory filings at night. He notices something subtle, a reporting lag in a federal loan-backed securities program designed to stimulate small business lending after the 2008 crash. The program is massive, billions in guarantees, oversight split between agencies, data verification outsourced. And there it is, a seam. The government guarantees portions of certain private loans, but verification of the underlying collateral trails by months. During that window, capital flows freely. No alarms trigger unless defaults spike. He asks a question during a compliance meeting. What happens if collateral is temporarily misclassified during the reporting window? No one answers directly. Instead, someone changes the slide. That silence becomes a blueprint. By 28, he leaves the firm and launches his own investment vehicle. It markets itself as a specialized lender focused on underserved markets. The website is clean. The mission statement talks about revitalizing communities. Investors love it. Pension funds sign on. 2 university endowments commit $40 million combined. He structures loans that qualify for federal guarantees. On paper, everything complies. In practice, collateral is inflated. Shell entities quietly purchase distressed assets, cycling them through layers of limited liability companies. Appraisals are optimistic. Auditors see paperwork, not reality. The first year, returns outperform competitors by 11%. Investors call him a prodigy. Behind closed doors, he studies Treasury oversight reports. He times loan submissions around staffing shortages. Federal agencies are understaffed. Budget cuts hollow out investigative teams. He is not hacking servers. He is exploiting delay. Is this fraud or just aggressive financial engineering? At what point does optimization become deception? By year 3, assets under management swell past $600 million. The guaranteed portions stack up. If defaults occur, taxpayers absorb the hit. If they don't, profits soar. He hosts charity galas, appears on panels beside former regulators, donates to political campaigns. Both sides. Access matters. A junior analyst inside his firm flags inconsistencies in collateral valuations. The memo circulates internally. It disappears within 48 hours. The analyst resigns 2 weeks later. Why does no one outside the company raise an alarm? Because on the surface, defaults remain low. Cash flows in. Government dashboards show compliance metrics within tolerance. Oversight bodies rely on the data he provides. By 2016, the exposure tied to his structured loans exceeds $250 million in federally guaranteed funds. He tells close associates that the system is designed to be managed. That bureaucracy moves too slowly to see what's happening in real time, that he is simply faster. The flaw he discovered as a junior analyst is now the backbone of an empire. But federal programs eventually reconcile numbers. And when reconciliation comes, discrepancies don't whisper. They detonate. An internal audit at the Treasury flags a cluster of loans tied to overlapping entities. The names differ. The addresses repeat. A forensic accountant circles 3 transactions in red. Someone forwards the file to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Agents begin pulling bank records, and on a quiet June morning, they decide they've seen enough. What they uncover next will raise a more uncomfortable question. Was he the architect of a brilliant deception, Or just the most visible player in a system that almost invited exploitation? By the time the FBI begins tracing wires, the money has already moved, not vanished, moved, layered through 47 domestic entities and 9 offshore vehicles registered in the Cayman Islands and Malta. On paper, each company appears independent. In reality, the same 3 executives sign across the structures. His signature threads through them all. Subtle, consistent. Assets under management peak at $1.4 billion. The federally guaranteed portion tied to his loan structures, just over $250 million. That number becomes a quiet alarm inside the Treasury's Office of Inspector General. Because if those loans collapse, taxpayers absorb the loss. And collapse is exactly what begins to happen. 3 businesses default within the same quarter, then 7 more. When investigators examine the underlying collateral, they find properties appraised at $12 million, selling at auction for less than $4 million. The gap is not market fluctuation, it's fabrication. But here's where the escalation twists. He doesn't deny risk. In fact, he anticipates it. Months before defaults spike, he quietly shifts personal funds into protected trusts. He reduces visible ownership stakes. He hires a former federal prosecutor as general counsel. Why prepare for impact unless you know impact is coming? As the FBI builds its case, he expands aggressively. He launches a second fund focused on green infrastructure redevelopment, another $300 million raised. Political support increases. Sustainability attracts federal enthusiasm. Grants flow. Subsidies stack. The system that once overlooked him now publicly praises him. Investigators face a dilemma: intervene early with partial evidence, or wait and risk deeper losses. Inside the Bureau, the case file grows from 200 pages to 3,800, wire transfers flagged, email chains subpoenaed. A whistleblower from the accounting department approaches authorities under immunity. She describes pressure to smooth valuations before quarterly reporting deadlines. But smoothing is not necessarily criminal. Intent must be proven. Did he knowingly misrepresent collateral values? Or did independent appraisers overestimate in good faith? The distinction determines prison time or none. A grand jury convenes. Meanwhile, he attends fundraisers in Washington, D.C. Photographs place him within 10 feet of 2 senators who sit on committees overseeing financial regulation. His donations are legal, his access undeniable. Power rarely announces itself loudly. It operates through proximity. When the first subpoenas hit his office, markets don't panic. Investors receive carefully crafted letters framing the inquiry as a routine regulatory review. Withdrawals are limited by contractual lockups. Money stays in. The FBI requests internal communications. His legal team delays, negotiates scope, challenges warrants. Months pass. How long can a $250 million exposure remain contained before it becomes a national scandal? Pressure escalates when a Treasury analyst leaks concerns to a journalist. A financial publication runs a cautious headline. Questions surround federally backed loan fund. Stock in affiliated companies dips 7% in a day. He calls an emergency meeting. According to testimony later revealed, he tells executives, "This is survivable. The system cannot afford a full collapse." That sentence hangs in the air, because he may be right. If prosecutors charge aggressively and the fund implodes, pension funds lose millions. University endowments take hits. Political allies face scrutiny for endorsing him. Federal guarantee programs look vulnerable. A trial could expose regulatory gaps. Congressional hearings could follow. The cost of full accountability may ripple far beyond one man. Behind closed doors, negotiations begin even before the indictment is public. His attorneys float cooperation, partial admission, financial settlement. The Department of Justice weighs options. Proving criminal intent in complex financial structuring cases is notoriously difficult. Juries struggle with layered entities and regulatory nuance. Defense teams exploit ambiguity. Then something unexpected surfaces. An internal memo from early in his career, the compliance meeting where he first asked about misclassification during reporting windows. The memo captures concern from a supervisor. It suggests awareness of loopholes. Is that foresight or premeditation? Prosecutors see opportunity. Defense sees interpretation. The indictment finally drops. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, making false statements to federally insured institutions, and securities fraud tied to inflated collateral valuations. Maximum exposure, decades in federal prison. He surrenders voluntarily. Markets brace. And just as the public expects a courtroom spectacle, negotiations accelerate. Because the deeper investigators dig, the more uncomfortable the implications become. If he manipulated the system, Who designed it to be so easily manipulated? He enters the courthouse without handcuffs. No dramatic perp walk. No cameras catching panic. Just controlled steps, a composed expression, and a legal team that has already mapped out the next 6 months. Prosecutors initially push for a public trial. The evidence stack is heavy: internal emails, inflated appraisals, structured shell entities. On paper, it reads like calculated deception. Yet as pretrial hearings unfold, something shifts. Defense attorneys argue complexity. They frame the case as regulatory gray area. They present industry experts who testify that aggressive valuation practices are common in high-yield loan markets. They question whether federal oversight guidelines were ever clearly defined. Then they introduce a different narrative. They argue that federal agencies approved these loans, that government auditors signed off, that Treasury reporting systems accepted the data. If the system validated the numbers, can intent be criminal beyond a reasonable doubt? The courtroom quiets, because proving fraud in white-collar cases isn't about suspicion, it's about precision. Did he knowingly falsify data, or did he exploit ambiguity that regulators failed to close? Behind closed doors, the Department of Justice recalculates risk. A full trial means exposing internal weaknesses in federally guaranteed lending programs. It means Treasury officials taking the stand. It means defense attorneys dissecting oversight failures in open court. And there's another problem. Several large pension funds, including one representing over 400,000 public employees, remain financially entangled. A catastrophic verdict could trigger liquidity shocks. He offers cooperation, not a confession of grand conspiracy, something narrower. He agrees to plead guilty to a reduced charge of misrepresenting collateral documentation. No admission of systemic fraud. He agrees to forfeit $38 million in personal assets, $250 million in exposure, $38 million returned. How does that math work? Prosecutors argue restitution from seized assets and structured repayments will soften the blow. They emphasize the difficulty of litigating financial nuance before a jury. The plea deal lands. Sentence: 30 months in federal prison, eligible for reduction with good behavior. No lifetime industry ban. No admission that the federal program itself was fundamentally compromised. Financial headlines describe it as a significant penalty. Critics call it symbolic. He reports to a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. No barbed wire, no violent offenders. He serves 22 months. During incarceration, he drafts white papers on regulatory modernization. He writes letters to former colleagues outlining lessons learned. He positions himself not as a villain, but as a case study in systemic inefficiency. Upon release, he doesn't disappear. Within 18 months, he consults for a private equity firm specializing in distressed infrastructure. He avoids direct management roles, but his network remains intact. Political donations cease publicly, yet relationships endure quietly. The federal loan program undergoes reform. Reporting windows tighten. Collateral verification accelerates. Oversight budgets increase, modestly. No congressional hearings. No sweeping overhaul. The system absorbs the impact. And the unsettling truth lingers. A $250 million exposure resulted in less than 2 years behind bars. Was justice served, or was stability prioritized? Internal DOJ memos later reveal that prosecutors feared destabilizing confidence in federally backed lending markets. A drawn-out trial risked headlines about government failure. Negotiation preserved institutional credibility. The case becomes a footnote in financial compliance seminars. But inside regulatory agencies, his name circulates differently, not just as a fraudster, as a stress test. Years later, a new investigation emerges involving renewable energy subsidies and layered tax credits. Different actors, similar reporting lag, similar structural opacity. The pattern feels familiar. If you think this was extreme, wait until you see what happened in the renewable tax credit collapse of 2024, because sometimes the real story isn't the criminal, it's the system that made him possible.